Hey guys, it's Godzilla1463 here. Got a pretty cool video for you here today. Going to be comparing the 545 by 39 and the 556 by 45. I really wanted to make this video because I really wanted to explain the differences between the two calibers, because a lot of the 7.62 AK guys want to bash on anyone who wants to choose the 545 by 39, and they'll typically say, you know, why would you choose the 545? It's basically just a carbon copy of the 556. That is far from true. There is many notable differences between the two calibers. That's what I want to get into today. Okay, so starting with the 545 by 39. Out of a 16-inch barrel, it'll usually go about 2,950 feet per second. Bullet weights usually they can range in between 53 grains to 70 grains. Many of the notable characteristics of the 545 are the following. It tumbles very early in soft tissue, so it's going to be very effective at putting down targets. And the main reason that it will tumble very early in soft tissue reliably is because of the hollow air cavity in the nose of the bullet. Most, if not all, 545 rounds generally have this hollow air cavity to ensure early bullet yaw, which is very important. Another notable characteristic of the 545 is it often overstabilizes when it contacts a hard object, okay? Which means it's a good barrier penetrator. The reason that the 545 is good in soft tissue is because it's very long, very slender, and very thin. The 545 is. So when it hits something of soft tissue, such as a human body for instance, what you'll see is a lot of fluid drag and fluid disruption, so the bullet will yaw and tumble very freely within soft tissue. However, when it hits a hardened object, like a concrete wall or a brick or something of this nature, there's less fluid drag on the bullet. So what you'll often see is the bullet will overstabilize and slide through objects that a 556 or 7.62 by 39 might not be able to penetrate through. In other words, the 545 kind of takes a needle-like effect, where it can just slide right through whatever it's trying to penetrate. Okay, so it's a very good penetrator due to the fact of its shape and also due to the fact of its velocity. Okay? Another interesting note about the 545, its wounding capability is not reliant on muzzle velocity. Due to the fact of the hollow air cavity, the 545 will tumble at very low velocities and still produce a very nasty wound, meaning if you're using the 545 out of a short barrel, it'll yaw and tumble at close ranges where you want it to. Or if you're shooting the 545 at distance and it contacts its target, soft tissue target, it'll still yaw and tumble reliably at further distances, which is very important. Now the 556 by 45. This is a cartridge, man. I've never seen one rifle caliber that's met more criticism than the 556. Some of it is unnecessary criticism. However, some of that criticism has been merited. Okay? And as you hear me describe the characteristics of the 556, you're going to see a mixed opinion on it, because it has some really good strengths, but it has some glaring weaknesses that I'm going to address. Okay. Specs of the 556 out of a 16-inch barrel, it'll usually clock in at about 2,900 to about 3,000 feet per second. The average bullet weight for the 556 is anywhere in between 55 grains to 77 grains. This is where it's going to start getting complicated. Okay. Notable characteristics. It's a very accurate bullet. The 556 is also slightly more accurate than the 545, and I mean very slightly. Okay, but due to just a slightly higher muzzle velocity, you're going to see just a slight increase in accuracy at range over the 545, but it's very slim. You're not going to see the differences are very slim. They're very what's the word? The differences between the two as far as accuracy goes There's barely any difference. Only very minor differences. Now, when it comes down to the ballistic performance of the 5.56, the word I could use to describe it is mixed and unreliable. Both the 5.45 and the 5.56 are dependent. They depend on bullet yaw for their wounding capabilities. However, the 5.56 is very inconsistent in this category due to a variety of factors. Okay. The bullet will often overstabilize when striking soft tissue. Okay, as you can see in this picture down below, here this is a ballistic gel test with XM193 ammunition, and as you can see, it really does not start to tumble or bend over until about 4.5 inches into ballistic gelatin. Now, this is not always the case. I have seen XM193 tumble earlier in tissue. However, this is fairly consistent with 5.56. It will generally not tumble until around 4 to 5 inches in tissue. And unless you're really shooting a big, thick individual, I guess I could say, the 5.56 will tend to overpenetrate when striking soft tissue. Okay? However, when it does yaw and tumble early, due to the cannelure that is present on the jacket, as you can see with the picture on the far right, pieces of the jacket will separate. Not a lot, but this is where you'll often hear guys talk about the 5.56's fragmenting ability, and insert air quotes over fragment. Okay, really what just happens is when the bullet yaws, pieces of the jacket will just peel off the round, and they'll exist within the wound channel, within the bullet yaw pattern. Okay, this extra little fragment really does not do much because it's generally very small and does not have a lot of energy in and of itself, and it usually stays within the yaw pattern. So the only really advantage of this is because it'll make the wound more difficult to clean if you got a guy to the hospital, but overall when it comes to immediate incapacitation, it really does not offer that much in the grand picture of things. Now, the fragmenting, quote-unquote, ability of the 5.56 is dependent on muzzle velocity. This is often what you'll hear when guys discuss the 5.56, is because unless the muzzle velocity is high, generally speaking, the 5.56 will overstabilize in soft tissue and will not yaw, tumble, fragment, etc., early in tissue. It'll do it very late in tissue, and it'll do what is most commonly called ice picking. It'll just poke a small hole in the target and just pass straight through, not causing a lot of damage. Okay. This is where the 5.56 and the 5.45 differ tremendously, is the reliability of each cartridge. And the reason the 5.45 is just more consistent with its wounding capabilities is because of the air pocket in the nose. This air pocket basically guarantees bullet yaw 100% of the time. The 5.56, because it does not have a hollow air pocket in the nose, it's basically a 50-50 chance whether it'll tumble early in flesh or whether it won't. So this is generally what you're going to see. The 5.56, when it does its job, it's a great cartridge. However, when it doesn't do its job, it's not that great when it comes to performing. Now, when it comes to barrier penetration, because predominantly I've been talking about soft tissue, the 5.56 will tend to overstabilize in soft tissue, but it will often almost virtually disintegrate when it hits a hardened object due to the cannelure effect. When it hits something of solid mass versus a human body, like if you hit a concrete wall or a brick wall, the cannelure really takes into effect here. The jacket will basically completely separate and the bullet will basically just fall to pieces. So you're not going to have very consistent penetration with this round. It's not going to penetrate all that great when in comparison to the 5.45. Okay. Now I've seen Russian versions of the 5.56 that have come out, and they completely get rid of the cantilever completely, and they try to turn the 5.56 into a pseudo 5.45, where it's just solely reliant on early bullet tumbling and all that stuff without the cantilever and etc., and it performs much better within ballistic terms. Okay, it'll act more like a 5.45. But predominantly, what you'll see with the comparison of these two, the 5.45, because it was built in response to the 5.56, it was made to answer the problems that the 5.56 had. The 5.45 was made to be much more consistent, which is where its main advantage comes in at. And which is why, if somebody ever asked me, which do you prefer, 5.56 or 5.45, I'm always going to choose 5.45. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope this has been informative for you, and I hope you have enjoyed. I'll see you next time.